Reality, if you're coming back from a knee injury, just doing PT and just relying on PT to get you back to 100% is not enough. And here's 5 exercises that all athletes should be doing alongside PT. First one is gonna be sled pulls. Just like how I talk about backwards treadmill walks, this is a great job of strengthening all those muscles around your knees, as well as getting as much blood flow running through your knees. So it's protecting and healing your knees at the same time. This is an exercise that you can literally do every single day, and I recommend doing it every single day because it's gonna expedite the recovery process. The second exercise is gonna be 90-degree banded hip flexor isometrics, holding it right here for about 10 to 15 seconds. When you have a knee injury, a lot of times your hip flexors want to start to shut down and become very weak. And when you have weak hip flexors, it puts so much excess stress on your knees, causing pain or dysfunctioning, or even worse, make you more prone to future injury. So getting your hip flexors as strong as humanly possible is going to be super important for your overall recovery. And while it's super important to train everything above the knees, everything below the knees is going to be super important to train as well. Because your first line of defense for your knees is everything below. It's the foundation. I mean, what's a good sports car with flat tires? Same thing with us. So these next 2 exercises really concentrate on the foot complex, ankle complex, soleus, calves, everything below the knees. So the next exercise is going to be the spring ankle, as this exercise does a great job of increasing your force absorption and power transfer in 5 different sport-specific positions. And then we have the 3-way banded calf raise, facing forward, sideways, and the other side. This exercise does a great job of strengthening your muscles to be able to absorb force in all 3 directions. And then obviously further down in the recovery process, once you start doing plyometrics and jumping, one exercise that's going to be super beneficial is drop jumps. Drop jumps do a great job of increasing your force absorption, your reaction speed, and also gaining coordination and proprioception and kind of knowing where you are in space, which is oftentimes lost after an injury.
Awesome. We're live. What's going on, Christian?
Hey, Eric. Things are great.
Awesome.
Today was first day back at UNE in the physical therapy department teaching the first year students. Today we taught them how to do massage or soft tissue mobilization. Yeah, that was pretty fun. Nice. Everyone finding their trigger points in their calves was an eye-opening experience.
Yeah, you never know. You never know till you start pressing, right? That's awesome. Good for you guys getting back into it. Yeah, I remember my first time when we did those different massage techniques. It was honestly one of my more favorite labs in PT school because you just get free massages for like 2 hours.
It was such a tease, though. It was only one class.
Yeah,
we had one day of fun, and that was it.
I had you're gonna laugh at this. I had a nice end of my day today. I had a spine eval, and it was for thoracic back pain, and it was very general, and there's no red flags or medical concerns. It was just right on the spine, no rib concerns, no breathing concerns. She's already done chiropractic care, so she's got adjustments. She was dry needled. She had a TENS unit, like all these things. And so she had imaging done. Imaging didn't show anything. So I'm just like, all right, I'm glad that I'm like the last resort right now. Okay, you've already done 1, 2, and 3. So now we get to start messing around with 4, 5, and 6. So that's always fun when you get those. And
yeah, well, what'd you end up settling on this person needing? I'm assuming some extra strengthening and probably some amount of continued manual therapy that seemed to be effective.
Yeah. She hasn't, the thing is, she hasn't really found anything to be super effective yet. I think one of the things she needs is just a graded activity program, and just because she's just not very active. And so we talked about getting some activity back in her life. She's very tender, like right on the paraspinals, just like pressing. You kind of fall into that gutter of the vertebrae and you press into those paraspinals, and it's just like trigger points there. To which I was like, I would love to dry needle this, but she already had it. And the chiropractor that did the dry needling, she said it was really painful. And so I don't know if she's super sold on doing it again. So I'm like, shoot. But yeah. Definitely you can tell pressing on like that like T10, T9 spinous process was just like very, just wouldn't want to move at all. And then her paraspinals are just super, super hot right now. And so I did some anti-rotation exercises with her, did some different mobility she can do at home for that T-spine, because she hasn't done any like specific T-spine mobility or stretches. So gave her some of that. At the end of it, she's like, yep, that's definitely everything we did with the exercises. It's definitely targeting right where I hurt. So I'm like, well, let's just grade this, and over the next couple of weeks, or see where we can go from there. So yeah, that's T-spine work right there.
Try a bunch of stuff. Usually exercise helps, though. That's a good start.
So Christian and I are here to do another podcast, And today we have one straight out of left field. I sent you this last night, Christian. We were trying to get into TikTok more, and I was on TikTok last night and I saw a video of this ex-collegiate football player who's had, I think from his videos, it sounds like he's had 3 ACL surgeries. And and he goes over in the video, which if you listen to the very beginning of the podcast, you will have heard the video from the TikTok and seen my blind reaction to it, which wasn't much of a reaction because we're saving it for the podcast, hence the topic tonight. And so I showed Christian the video right before this. So we both saw the video. I saw it twice. Christian saw it once. And we just wrote down our general thoughts on what he says. And we're just going to kind of give off the cuff here what we think about different things. So it's not rehearsed. We haven't looked up research articles for it. This is just off the top of our head and, some different things that we wanted to say about it. So good, bad, or otherwise.
Feelings. Yeah.
Exactly. Before we get any further, I do want to give credit though. This individual's name is Matthew Maloney. His name on TikTok is, his username is ACL Wonders. So if you ever wanted to look him up, that's where we want to give credit where credit's due. That's his content that we're talking about. And yeah, let's dive into it. So the first thing that came to my mind, Christian, talk about raw feelings. At the very beginning of the video, he says something along the lines of, if you're coming back from a knee injury, physical therapy alone is not enough. He then goes on to talk about all these different exercises and things that he does, to which I think any therapist that's worth their salt here, we're probably doing all of these things in PT. Like everything he's talking about. I'm like, I don't know what you think PT is. If you think it's just soft tissue massage and, some light exercises, but everything he talks about here, I'm like, yep, we do this, we do this, we do this. This is all PT. It's a part of the plan of care.
That was my closing thought after watching it too. I was like, oh, he's just describing physical therapy. At least part of what we do. But he does have a good point where the way people typically view physical therapy is with steam and cream, which is something I learned from an older physical therapist here in Maine. So it's just like we do massage, we do hot packs, we do stim, maybe some like banded exercises. That's part of what we do, sure, but that's not all of it. We love to get into all the different movements that this guy was doing, but I hear where he's coming from.
Yeah. And to his defense, what I'll also say is I don't really have an issue with what he's saying, right? Like everything he's doing, I'm like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Like these are all good exercises. To be clear, all of these would come later on in the plan of care, most likely, right? Especially for someone like him who has had ACL surgeries, I'm assuming. All of these exercises would likely come towards the middle/end of the physical therapy plan of care, but still very much in the realm of physical therapy. And so the other thing I wanted to talk about is some of his reasoning behind why we do these things, right? I think there's some, maybe a little bit of fluff in there, you could say, that like when people, I feel like we try and, build up what's going on with these exercises to make it sound really cool and whatnot. And so I want to tackle the first one here, Christian, and you can push back if you disagree, but
Sure.
he talks about in the video doing backwards reverse sled pulls, or he shows in the video like walking backwards on an inclined treadmill. So you're pushing the treadmill away from you as you're walking. And his rationale on that was to promote blood flow in the knee for protection and healing, to expedite the healing process. I would argue that if you just walk normally or you just live life normally, where you're going to get blood flow through the knees regardless. Maybe if you do these particular things, it's going to increase your heart rate more and it's going to make blood flow more apparent in those areas. But so would riding a stationary bike. So would going on an elliptical. So would anything that increases your heart rate is going to make more blood go through the whole body.
Yeah, I think it's a great exercise to do, but it's exactly how we think about getting someone on a bike after a knee surgery. We're trying to do a very low impact, low eccentric load exercise to limit the overall stress that's occurring at the joint. So when you take the impact part out of things, you don't stress the bone or the cartilage or the ligaments or the tendons, really the muscles either, as much. And so you don't incur as much damage. That just feels way better. And so Sled pulls are just one way to accomplish that task. Another way that we'll do often, just for the sake of space and equipment, is just backwards walking on a treadmill, sometimes on an incline. That accomplishes the same goal.
Yep. I'm just going to keep going through my notes here. Feel free to jump in whenever. Again, we don't have this rehearsed or planned out, so our apologies if it's scatterbrained. But next one is isometrics. He talks about different isometric banded exercises at the knee.
For the hip flexors.
For the hip flexors, yeah, for the hip flexors.
Now that's where he got a little weird with his explanation for why we train hip flexors.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just more ignorant of the biomechanics of hip flexors during gait and squats and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm serious. I think I just don't know enough about it to understand his point fully.
Yeah.
But do you?
No. Maybe it's because, well, okay, two reasons. One, we're both board certified orthopedic physical therapists that work with this day in, day out, and we are ignorant to what he's talking about. Or two, what he's talking about is not that big of a deal in the broad scheme of things. Now, in my experience working with patients post ACL, the hip flexors, they tend to be overactive. They tend to be very guarded, especially that rectus femoris, right? Tends to not want to let that knee move, especially if you had something like a quad tendon autograft done. Like, it just doesn't want to let it move because it's scared, it's protecting, right? So there is that component. But I would also argue, so does every other muscle in the hip get kind of, quote, turned off or dysfunctional, right? Hip flexors, hip abductors, hip extensors, etc. Because if you're not bearing weight and you're not using that leg, all those muscles are going to get, quote, dysfunctional. And so it's going to be good to do these exercises for the hip and the knee, or for the hip flexors and the lateral glutes and the posterior glutes, all these other things. It's going to be important to do all of that after surgery.
Yeah, I like to think about these issues with just what injuries happen the most and then in what sports. That kind of tells you where these muscles are used and then what they're susceptible to. And when it comes to hip flexors, I don't really see too many hip flexor issues outside of sprinting and kicking and maybe the rare striker in some kind of MMA type thing. But where else do you tend to see hip flexor strains?
Post total hip.
Oh yeah.
If you have someone who comes in with like post total hip arthroplasty, and it really only happens if you work them too hard too soon, right?
Yeah, you got to wait a little while for that.
Right. So if you start doing some pretty aggressive hip flexing type exercises, those hip flexors can get a little flared up.
Like I've never
That's my
had
own
someone
opinion.
come
Yep.
to me with a hip flexor injury powerlifting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to his point about isometrics, though, isometrics, this is something we're doing literally day one when it comes to therapy, right? We're doing quad sets, hamstring sets, etc. Those are isometric exercises. And yeah, as the tissue heals, we're going to start to implement heavier isometric loads to that area because we're learning how much more valuable isometrics are now than what we did maybe in years past. But in point of the isometric exercises, I would say as physical therapists, we do them right away. Phase
I
one.
do them every day. People get them every single day, especially for tendon issues and even joint pain.
Absolutely.
Like arthritis. Sometimes they can't handle going through range of motion, so you get them in a comfortable spot. Maybe it's like a half squat or like just above parallel squat or a wall sit. Have them do that. Makes the knees feel pretty good.
Yep. I agree. Okay. I don't want to speak too much on this next point because I don't want to give false information. But there's the next 2 points, actually. He talks about these exercises, specifically the hip flexor isometric stuff that he's doing, as reducing risk or reducing the idea of being prone to future injuries. I would say that to an extent, if you have terrible quad strength, like 50% symmetry side to side, and we cleared you somehow to go back to playing, that'd probably put you at risk for future injury, right? But we also know, what is it, like 25%, Christian? 25% after ACL tears get a meniscal tear along with it. And it's like,
Any other knee injury. Yeah.
you can do everything in your power. You can, and I have this from experience. I had Division II football guy about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, and we worked the crap out of everything, like for 9-10 months, and we did crazy plyometrics and heavy loading and these isometrics and like single leg stability. I even brought in my vestibular side of it, and we were doing optokinetic reflexes and cognitive tasks.
You're just
Like,
making stuff up at that point.
right. And like, we were just throwing everything at him, you know? And guess what happened the second week he got back? Tore his meniscus.
Away, man.
Swear to God. It's like, if you were an outsider looking in, you'd be like, that's a kick-ass rehab program. Oh my God. Ended up tearing his meniscus. And you can do everything you want, and you're still going to be at a higher risk for injuring the knee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, isometrics, they definitely have their place, but for injury prevention, muscles don't usually get hurt isometrically. They get hurt eccentrically. So as they're being forced to contract while they're stretching. And so if you really want to have the best injury prevention plan, you should have some period of doing eccentric loading. That makes the most sense to me. I'm pretty sure that's what most of the research will say. But I do know isometrics have some part. I just don't know exactly to what degree compared to eccentrics.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say this, my last thought on that is when he demonstrates the isometric in video, he does have some really nice quads.
Oh, he's got
I'll
great
give him
legs.
that.
Great legs.
His quads are fantastic.
He must know what he's
Anyways.
talking about.
Yeah. It's not genetics.
That's how that works.
It's not genetics or the football training he's done his whole life. It's his knowledge. My next point I want to talk about is he brings up training your ankles and your calves, and he makes the analogy to what good is a sports car with flat tires.
Sure.
The idea that he was talking about was this idea of regional interdependence. And so the idea that point A is going to affect point B, which is going to make point C do a certain thing. Track that, kind of Sherlock Holmes it up the body and track where everything is going. You're going to say, oh, 3 points down or up the chain, this is why you had the injury, or this is why you have pain, because of this idea of regional interdependence. Now, I've seen research on both sides. Seen research, just kind of accepting without question that, yep, regional interdependence, it's a thing. If you work on it, it helps people out, all these other things. I've also seen research where it shows regional interdependence doesn't really matter. It doesn't really do what we think it's doing, right? And so I would say in terms of like research based, I feel like the jury is still out on regional interdependence. That's just my, I guess, opinion, interpretation of what we see in the research. And so I think it's great to work everything. Like we always say, Christian, it's good to err on the side of caution. It's better to be stronger than it is to be weaker in those different parts, right? Calves all the way up to the hips, even the core, etc. But what are your thoughts when he talks about training, the calves and the ankles and the hips and all that, this idea of regional interdependence?
I'm actually a huge fan of training ankles. I think it is something that people don't train enough. And unless you get it from a certain lift you do or a sport you play, you really should try to include it in your programming. I mean, we have tons of issues like plantar fasciitis and Achilles tendinopathy that happen often because of people not being in shape in their feet, and they go and do something too hard too fast. And so from a injury prevention perspective, I like it, but also just from a sport performance thing too, where a big issue personally that I am working on is weakness in my right foot and calf. It's been lingering from a high school injury. I just never really seem to address it enough. And being more serious about it now, and ever since I've been really trying to work it, I feel a lot better in just how I absorb force with running, and I feel like it's made me faster as well. I just have more force to push through the ground, and ankle feels better, so that's a nice plus.
Yeah. So I agree with that. And just to be clear, what I hear from that is it sounds like after an injury, like an ACL surgery or something, things aren't worked right. The ankle isn't worked, the hips aren't worked, etc. And so to try and work on the ankle in specific, right, to prevent plantar fasciitis, to try and help, stay away from an Achilles tendinopathy before you get back into these activities to avoid a secondary discomfort, it's good to work those things, right? Versus the idea, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, versus the idea of saying, let's do all of these foot intrinsic exercises so that we avoid having another ACL.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about regional interdependence. And really just the question is, how granular do you have to be
Yeah.
helpful or more helpful. And usually if you're training your body pretty globally with the big joints all doing movements in different directions, you're going to cover your bases really, really well. You really only need to get that specific and into the minutia with doing foot intrinsics if you have a foot injury already. You probably don't need to be working on those things that regularly. And they're certainly not clearly linked to ACL tears. I think there might be some research on foot strength and knee injury. I feel like I've read that, but that's not the biggest fish. Like that is such a
Yeah.
small contribution.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, he also talks about some other things like three-way banded calf raises where the band's
I actually
pulling
like
on the
that one a
ankle in
lot.
directions.
I've never seen
And
that.
I haven't seen that either. Now, this is where I'm just skeptical, but doing a concentric heel raise with the band pulling on the foot in three different directions, the soleus gastroc complex it works in one plane. It works in the sagittal plane. It's not like it has transverse plane or frontal plane motion when it acts on the foot, right? It just works on plantar flexion, sagittal plane.
For
And
the
so,
most part, yeah.
right. So, and then he goes on to, in the video, he jumps to the next part where it shows him like making these like big lateral cuts and sprinting, etc. I think working with that is going to, working on the Achilles and the calf complex with that is going to help with some of that sprinting stuff or the cutting. But to take that three-way banded exercise and say that's going to translate to lateral movement, change of directions, etc. My feeling, and again, this is a blind reaction, so this is not rehearsed. My
Sounds
feeling
like
is
a
that
fool, Eric.
if it's just sagittal plane, doesn't matter if we have a band pulling in a bunch of different directions, right? Yeah, that's just my thought on it. I don't know if I would argue that's not doing as much as what it looks to be doing, but
Yeah, it's like how useful is crawling, or how useful are those dynamic stabilization exercises where you're lying on your back, for example, and your arms are pointed to the ceiling and someone is just pushing your arm around, you're trying to resist. How helpful are those for performance or injury prevention? Not that much.
how much is it going to
this
translate?
Yeah, well, exactly. There's like, if you want things to translate to the goal movements, what you really care about doing, you need them to be pretty specific. Or if you're not going to do that, you have to be pretty strenuous in other ways that makes the target tissues grow. So like hypertrophy training for your muscles will build more potential for really good strength and really good functional performance when you later train it that way. But that kind of banded exercises where you're stabilizing yourself up there, hard to argue you're doing much of that. It's probably more of like a neuromuscular thing where you're going to get really good at balancing in that context.
Yeah, yeah. But to your point though, talking about liking the exercise, I do think it's a cool variation on doing calf raises though. Having that different direction being pulled. Because it's likely working, I would argue, probably more often like the hips more, versus like the foot and ankle, right? And then last thing that I have is that he talks about doing like drop jumps and bettering your force absorption and all these different things. Yeah, I mean, I think that's at the end, more of the later stages of an Achilles or ACL rehab, something like drop jumps. Love it.
Yeah, I love that exercise. I give it to every single patient that needs to learn how to jump.
Yeah.
If I think they're not very good at jumping yet, that's a great place to start because you learn how to absorb force. That's the whole point. You take away the whole force generation component, you take away a lot of the balance, and you just focus on raw impact. Can you do this? Can you get comfortable with this? And just build some work in there and then progress that to jumping and then landing and then many other variations. So that one is very useful. And I'll do lots of different variations of that kind of thing where you're just absorbing force in different directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right on, man. Okay, that's all the points I had. You got anything else I missed you want to touch on with the video?
No, I'm just sad that you gave me such an agreeable video to watch. I was hoping for something a little juicy. I don't think I had any problems with this guy's video. It's great.
Yeah. I know. I feel like I've been I'm like Rotten Tomatoes over here critiquing it.
Well, he's kind of riding the line of like, is he going to go too far and do some kind of weird stuff, or is he going to keep it pretty toned down and be fairly, I guess what I would call correct and true to the research and not be making stuff up. And I think he's right on that edge for me, but I think he's still good.
maybe that's the whole point of these podcasts, is for us to decide whether or not the video we watched crossed the dark side.
It's
So
funny you say that. I just for some reason today was thinking about part of my introduction to the students when I first met the first years. That was actually going to say, like, hi, I'm so and so. I do sports and orthopedic PT, but I also practice the dark arts, where I do spinal adjustments and needling and massage. Because it
dude,
kind
that
of
would've
feels
been
that way. We do
that
the
would've
dark
been a
arts.
baller. That would have been such a sick introduction if you did that.
I'll save that for next year.
There you go. Yeah. Jesus Christ, this guy's Jason Bourne. I would agree with you though. I think, like I said in the beginning, overall, I think everything he does is solid. I think that a lot of what he does, I think a lot of PTs are or should be doing it in their rehab process. But in terms of just the information he puts out there, stamp of approval. I think it's all good stuff.
Yeah, if you don't think that that's not physical therapy, you're going to the wrong physical therapist. Like, that is stuff that we are supposed to be doing with you, more or less, at some point in your, especially like an ACL reconstruction. The patient is not discharged, so those things are done and more. Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But like when they are at that stage, we're going to be shifting them more to, okay, let's go back to practice and do drills, or go to, if you have a strength coach or something, or athletic trainer at school, go do some of that stuff with them. But yeah, that stuff has to happen. That's part of physical
Yeah.
therapy.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, I don't know if we can call him Matt, but thanks, Matt, for the video. We'll be doing more of these. You know, I'm gonna pick next time for you, Christian. I'm gonna get a Squat University video out.
Something.
We can stamp them with the dark arts approval. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. This has been our first attempt of doing blind reactions to TikTok videos. All right, Christian. Till next time, man. We'll talk to you later.
Later, Eric.